Hello. It's been a while. So, Canto 9, huh? It feels like Honlu washed his grandma only a week ago, and now we are once again experiencing peak fiction and hype moments in Aura and Roland for some reason. Dang, a lot has happened since I was gone, huh? In any case, I figured I will make an opinion piece about it, because I like to complain. And there's a lot of stuff to complain about. Don't get me wrong, this was a highly enjoyable Canto, almost on par with Canto 7 for me in terms of gameplay. Unbreakable coins, my beloved. But in terms of how the story was executed and the relevance of many characters, especially the supposed main ones, it left a bad taste in my mouth. But okay, I'll stop beating around the bush. We'll start off with the positives and move on to my criticisms, after which I'll give my overall grade and put it in the tier list or something. I'm a YouTuber, I've got to indulge myself in some slop once in a while. In any case, let's say nice things about the Canto, cause there are a lot of them. Canto 9 has perhaps the strongest start of any Canto. We are thrown into action almost immediately and are met with a decently enjoyable boss fight against Mago. It shakes up our understanding of part 1's up to this point and makes us hit the ground running while sprinkling intrigue and characterization in a simultaneous fashion. Ryoshu is very proactive, showing her very well-known characteristic of cruel excitement, while being contemplative about her mysterious and tattered past. The situation itself is dire, several known characters are in very real danger and the stakes are high. Seeing Alyssa be in heavy pain with a mortified look on her face immediately got me invested in her survival, as well as everyone else's. There's not too much filler, and frankly, I don't agree with people complaining about it. It's a pretty low amount of uninteresting win rate fights that break up the pacing from time to time, so when compared to other Cantos, I'd say it's a very healthy balance of non-focused encounters and boss fights. The only real complaint here is that there's only one type of fodder enemy with a reskin. And yeah, visually it's not very interesting, but you were gonna spam P-enter anyway on these, so I'd say mechanically there's no difference. I would have loved to see some index proselyte mobs though, that could be fun. The ending is decent, with a good introduction of the Pinky and the Ring Apprentices, their relationship and character being hinted at with subtle touches, mainly with how Ren is seething at Albina, even though he tries to portray himself as the level-headed one in the group. Overall, part 1 has a very strong setup and gets you hook, line and sinker into the chaos that transpires in the LCE. In comparison, part 2 is just more of the same. It's not exactly bad, but there's not a lot to talk about here beyond the immediate events that transpire here. If we are to stay positive here, then the Sora and Minky Nurse Father fights are a sizable step up from the previous boss encounters, being very cinematic while giving plenty of trouble to the unprepared players. An honorable mention goes to the updated Abnormality fights, which are admittedly a mixed bag, but the fact that they were redesigned with modern ID power creep in mind is already a good sign. Other than that, we've got enter moments, Vespa shows up, Dante starts tweaking, Moses gives interesting insights into Matthias and Kira, Aindu becomes a character I care about, Hohenheim becomes the best character ever. Honestly, anything Hohenheim rated immediately gets a boost, he's that goated in this Canto. And the ending with everyone gathering for a counterattack on the House of Spiders is pretty cool too. Now the party is getting crazy. We've got banger after banger after banger after banger. Part 3 is loaded to the brim with increased production quality, insane developments, quality characterization, and so much more. It honestly feels redundant to even describe anything here, because everyone already knows the strong points here. Future Sinclair giving the biggest hydrogen glow-up to a coffin baby that I've ever seen. Gregor finally having some payoff from having a bug arm in the form of giving the color a run for his money. Impeccable performance from almost every nurse father all throughout. And man, Muger Ryoshu. Despite my dissatisfaction with certain elements surrounding this moment, the fight itself gave me chills in how it was executed, and it was mainly the presentation. How the passives tell the entire story of Ryoshu's escape, how the slashes stay in the air and cut letters out of skills, having them be forgotten, and the music. Step aside, Millie, the real goat of Limbus is coming through. This is officially my favorite music track in the entire game, maybe in the whole franchise. The song alone tells a better story about Ryoshu's internal state at this moment than anything in this Canto, and this is not even a criticism, it's just that good. Amazing work, Studio EIM. Bravo. Alright, here's the moment you've come for, no more positivity. It's time to start complaining and be torn to shreds because God forbid you have an opinion about Project Moon's works that is even slightly negative. Let's start with the nitpicks and work our way up. I wasn't very satisfied with the Apprentices. They feel like the potential man of the narrative. There was a lot of promise in there, but most of the implied depth of the character wasn't exactly realized in a satisfying way. Lucio came disgustingly close to being someone who would matter, but then Gregor one-shots him and overshadows him completely. He appeared to be a servile abuse victim, and his passives and his final moments portray him as someone who knows the wrongs that have been done to him, despite his gratitude of being lifted from poverty and almost certain death. He would make a deeply sympathetic character who's on his way of recovering from the hierarchical programming of the thumb, but alas, no such thing comes to pass. Then we get Albina, who's very one-dimensional in her striving to be a freak, but I guess that's the ring for you. She does still follow the overall theme of Apprentices, that being the want to be recognized by their parental figures as someone who's of worth. And that's cool and all, but there's nothing beyond that in her. Get tornadoed, Clanker. However, Ren is arguably the worst offender of lost potential. With Lucia, you could argue his demise is fittingly tragic for a Project Moon character, but Ren was only given a tiny crumb of personality in Part 1, and a hint of something deeper during the Muga fight, when he throws himself towards certain death in an effort to save Araya. And then he gets deleted. I guess we'll see more in an update story or something, I don't know. On the other hand, Sora suffers from a very different problem. She's got the screen time, she's got the appeal, she's got the development, she's got ego, she's got Shin, she's got Mang, she's got the epic devil horns and the halo and a cute uwu personality, and she didn't do anything wrong and she's just so goddamn special and cute and unique. And I've got no problem with her personally. I just think her ego is a little uninspired, that's all. But when you factor in how ordinary other apprentices look in comparison to Sora, you start to question if it really was necessary to give all of these cool power systems to someone like her. It'd be fine if it was sufficiently explained. Like, what's so different about Sora that lets her use Shin and Mang, techniques that supposedly require intense concentration and discipline, something that Lei Hang struggled with of all people. Wouldn't it make more sense for Ren to have a power like that? And what about that ego? Albina seems like an individual who could manifest something, given her strong devotion to the arts. Lucia was on the cusp of grasping something during that fight, he was just cut short. All I'm saying is, it really diminishes the importance of ego and Shin when they get given out to characters who do not have sufficient enough explanations to have both at the same time. I would be much more content if she had only the ego, while Shin could be reserved for the actually strong people. What's weird about all of this is that Kira has the most development out of all apprentices, and she is the one who survives. She gets sufficient screen time during parts 1, 2, and 3, has an endearing personality, is a victim of circumstance and poor parenting, is from the middle, which is a fan-favorite faction, and gets to survive and potentially have even more development. Damn girl, you're even more privileged than the devil uncle over there. And that's not a dig at her character really, I do quite like her. But it's weird that she gets this treatment when she has the least amount of problems out of all the apprentices. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that there's a lot of lost potential of these guys, and it's sad to see cool ideas and designs be utilized like that. We will get to see more of them when they get their respective IDs, but I don't feel like Cantos should be excused from poor treatment of their casts when units from the gacha tell a better story about them than the main story itself. Just my opinion though. To tell you the truth, the Distortion Detective crew is actively detrimental to Canto 9. Okay, calm down, let me explain before I'm burned at the stake. I have no problem with the characters themselves, I think they're very well written and true to their source material. Moses can maybe come off as a bit of a smartass at times, but that's a very tiny nitpick. What I mean is that both structurally and narratively, the Distortion Detective cast takes away the spotlight, while making a mess out of parts 1 and 2. And while their inclusion is not too intrusive in part 1, part 2 focuses all of its cool moments on them. No, the sinners don't get to do anything, Vespa will save us from Sora, and Matthias for good measure. The whole Matthias interaction really does look like it's a chapter from their novel, with how absent everyone else is. You'd think part 2 would be the time to maybe calm down and delve deeper into Ryoshu's character, but we get split along 3 different perspectives where all the interesting shit happens only when either Moses, Vespa, or Ezra are on screen. It feels very imbalanced, like if their screen time got stuffed in here without much choice. That's where the lack of an Intervallo comes in. Every single Canto before this had an Intervallo that could give us the necessary context and ease us into the narrative of a main story chapter. Canto 9 has no such luxury. We've only got Spring Cultivation, which was just an epilogue of Canto 8, and the Arknights collab that has nothing to do with the story. Like, imagine if Nocturnal Sweeping didn't exist and Ryoshu's introduction, the Heisho's, and the entire setting of Hongyan were crammed into Canto 8. Parts 1 and 2 may become more content-rich, but they would be a loaded mess that takes away from other aspects. And I think that's exactly what happened to Canto 9. We were meant to have a distortion detective intervallo, where we would go around H-Corp with Moses and Ezra, solving distortions and getting to know them. We'd receive some small details about Ryoshu and then return to LCE, where we would get attacked by the House of Spiders, ending on a cliffhanger for Part 1. That way, we would start in the middle of Part 1 while having all the necessary context and screen time for Moses and Ezra. This would allow us to condense the raid into Part 1, while Part 2 starts us with us entering the House of Spiders. It would make the Canto much less disjointed and allow for more time to develop the Apprentices, Araya and Ryoshu, while making Part 3 much less bloated. Instead, we had to rush for the end of the year release and kill an Intervallo because of that, hurting the Canto in the process. Sasuga, Director Nim. If the aforementioned issues were the only ones, then I wouldn't even be complaining this much. But unfortunately, the structural issues that a lack of an Intervallo brings hurt not only the side characters, but the main duo as well, that being Ryoshu and her daughter. They're probably the weakest links in their own story. Let's start with Ryoshu. The flashbacks of her time in the House of Spiders are very successful in characterizing the nurse fathers and their parenting styles. It's also nice how baby, kid, and teen Ryoshus are distinct in their attitude towards them. Despite that, flashback Ryoshu has almost no through line when it comes to developing her main defining characteristics that we see in Sinner Ryoshu. There are 4 distinct traits that she previously exhibited in the main story: her love for grotesque and cruel art, her impulsive actions when it comes to creating said art, her abbreviative speech patterns, and her chain-smoking habit. The smoking is easy enough, she picked that up from Dihui Star, but everything else? Not very clear. She supposedly picked up the art obsession from Callisto, but she looks like she only tolerates his ramblings rather than indulges in his craft. There's only one half-hearted response from her and that's it. Nothing more from her flashback self. You'd think she'd have much more to say about this, given how IDs like Warp Ryoshu are all about painting the room picturesque. Her abbreviations are featured in the flashbacks, but there's no explanation on how she got that tendency to begin with. The nurse fathers don't do it, so why does she? And I know what you're going to say, but no, Araya didn't teach her that. She had the abbreviation habit before she was taught the Zoomer slang. It's safe to say that flashback Ryoshu is a watered-down version of our current Ryoshu. She has no personality beyond being an angsty, aggressive teen and caring for Araya. How she came to love art is a complete mystery when you consider her hate towards every single nurse father. But okay, maybe Kim Ji-hoon forgot. Maybe there wasn't enough time. I can forgive that, not too big of a deal. But there's one more thing. The time blood. Probably the most nonsensical and unexplained element of the entire Canto. What is time blood? Why does the Dihui Star have it? What determines the quality of your time blood? How did the Dihui Star even give birth to Ryoshu now that the purity of blood is in question? Who's the biological father? I sure hope it wasn't Rian. This is such a mess when you consider what Arayashiki is. So, it's a relic that was unearthed from deep within the runes that requires a person to have the ability to perceive the flow of time. Its ability was somehow discovered, which is interesting considering that almost no one can even achieve it or use it, save for Dihui Star. How did they find the person with the aptitude? I don't know, doesn't matter. She gives birth to a child who has the best time blood ever. Like, how did they know Ryoshu would be able to wield the sword better than her mother? What if the plan didn't work? Was the Dihui Star supposed to give birth to several dozens of Ryoshus until one of them had pure enough blood? All of this is unexplained and comes completely out of left field. The only moment that somewhat foreshadowed this was in Time Killing Time, when Ryoshu makes a completely reasonable deduction about the clock tower being tampered with, which she reaches thanks to a seemingly useless habit of hers. This made her out to be smart and observant, but no, it was blood speaking to her. Of course it was. How could we be so ignorant? All I'm saying is, this plot point is given so much importance while having next to no explanation or build-up, making it seem like it's a half-assed explanation behind why it had to be specifically Ryoshu to use the sword and become a paper shredder. But as the usual cope goes, I guess we'll wait and see until the next Intervallo or Canto. Yeah, right. The way Araya was handled is very confusing to me. First, she's a mass-produced project that looks identical to Dihui's star, implying that once Ryoshu's training was complete, she would also be cloned. I have no idea how that doesn't break the 7-day cloning taboo and why the farm can't just replicate Dihui's star 1,000 times over so that they have an army of unstoppable Shin-emitting Devil May Cry Virgils, especially now that they are aware they can just incubate them all in T-Corp safes so that they instantly gain all the required combat skills, but I digress. She lives with Ryoshu for an unspecified amount of time, where she probably becomes aware of her mother's hostile attitude towards the Nurse Fathers. She is then put in a safe and waits for Ryoshu to come back. For how long? You'd think it would be either about 3 or 4 days because of a lack of water, or maybe even less because of inevitable carbon dioxide poisoning she would suffer while breathing in such an enclosed space. Realistically, she would either fall unconscious and die or exit the safe in a matter of hours. But this is a sci-fi world, so maybe the time-accelerating safe comes with precautions for that. I don't know. In any case, she exits it from the inside, which is questionable. Seriously, if it's locked, how are you supposed to open it from within? She sees Rian, memories from different points in time come flooding in. She's convinced her mother abandoned her and accepts the Nurse Father's offer to become Dihui's star because they say that's how she'll get her mother back. What? What possible reason is there for her to accept this offer? She has to be aware of how the Nurse Fathers treated Ryoshu because she would have been told about it or seen it firsthand. It doesn't matter that Rian appears to be gentle, Ryoshu still despised his guts. There's no way Araya liked any of the people that have abused Ryoshu her entire life. But alright, maybe she's super naive and ignorant, it's maybe somewhat understandable for a kid. But remember, she now has access to knowledge from her entire life from beginning to end, mentally making her an adult who had spent much more time with Ryoshu. Even if she accepts the role now, she would slowly get flashes of her iterations throughout time, and get more knowledge about the Nurse Fathers and Arayashiki. She had a whole 2 years where she could train up, escape the House of Spiders, and attempt to find her mother. But instead, she chose to sit on her ass, train a useless apprentice who doesn't accomplish anything, and fester in her hatred for Ryoshu. She knows about the sword that cuts away memories. She knows that Ryoshu used the time-accelerating save herself multiple times, so it's safe to assume that she wouldn't know Araya would suffer such side effects. Any basis for her hatred immediately disappears once she knows that Ryoshu intended to come back for her, making the resentment from her abandonment moot and null. Araya should have expected 2 outcomes. Either her mother doesn't come back because she completely forgot about her, or she does come back but would barely recognize her, if at all, because the strongest weapon she has available to her that would allow Ryoshu to survive in the city is Arayashiki, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that she would suffer for it. It's a miracle that she even came back at all. But no, for Araya, memories themselves are more important than the fact that her mother overpowered a fucking relic with sheer willpower and managed to remember anything at all about her daughter. There's a line in Araya's announcer pack where she says that she probably wouldn't hate her mother as much if she knew that Arayashiki slashes away at the most precious memories first. Am I supposed to think that she was under the impression that the sword removes the unnecessary memories first? Or that she deliberately chooses which memories to remove? Why would you even come to such a conclusion? It's more fair to assume it erases random memories, but that doesn't disprove anything I've said so far. And this important information is never mentioned anywhere in the Canto itself, but it's hidden inside an announcer line that needs to be acquired through a paid fucking battle pass. Great job, Kinji-hun. Then Araya proceeds to clown around as Dihui's star and kills her mother's friends over and over while inflicting grievous injuries onto Ryoshu, spouts some cryptic shit just to torment her mother and test whether she would choose her or the Golden Bows, which obviously doesn't work because she's dressed as the person Ryoshu hates with her entire being. Then she proceeds to have a one-on-one duel with her, intentionally loses, is on the verge of death, and suddenly she likes Ryoshu now? No hate, no anything, just like that. it's so abrupt that it immediately took me away from the moment. The only explanation I can muster is that the blade slashed at the present Araya, who was full of hate, deleting her specifically while leaving past and future Arayas who are more loving towards Ryoshu. That's all I've got. Otherwise, it just comes out of nowhere and doesn't make much sense. Then she turns into a sheath that is her ego and disappears from the memories. That's it. What a nonsensical character with such inconsistent motivations, you'd really think she was 8 years old. Maybe I'm missing a point somewhere here, but for an emotional crux of the entire Canto, Araya was just too much of a confusing mess for me to be invested in her. It's unfortunate really, because I very much enjoyed her interactions with Ryoshu throughout the flashbacks. I don't even know what could be done to fix this. Maybe if we saw her spend more time with Ren while being the Dihoi star, maybe that would justify her hatred a bit more? Well, I don't know anymore at this point, let's move on. To me, this Canto feels like it was less about Ryoshu and more about setting up for future developments in the story. Several sinners got their upscales, side characters got their glow-ups, the Distortion Detective crew got their time in the limelight. It all feels very fan-servicey, the prime example of this being Rian. Have you noticed how irrelevant his whole Black Silence cosplay is to Ryoshu's story? And yet, he will be remembered as a Roland from Timu, potentially setting up future events because of his actions. The ending cutscene squeezing in the Gesellschaft and Endcorp is just icing on a giant foreshadowing cake. I was very much entertained by all these moments, don't get me wrong, but as a Sinner story, this was by far one of the weakest ones, only surpassing Canto 2 in its relevancy. The highs are incredibly high, but the lows are crippling. And yet, despite that, I did enjoy Canto 9 for all its hype moments and aura and stuff. I do have some more nitpicks, like how the flashbacks intentionally withhold information, making the state of Ryoshu's memories more ambiguous than they need to be, or how the Millie song felt relatively uninspired when compared to their other works, or the whole Rashomon theory fiasco, but I think I already said what needed to be said. If you were to ask me to name my favorite Cantos in order, it would probably look something like this. Final grade, 7.5 out of 10, B tier, good, whatever other metric reviewers use. Obviously, I'm not judging people for enjoying this Canto or even saying that it's a 10 out of 10. If you liked it that much, then I wouldn't dare to take that away from you. I only encourage people to look at the media they enjoy with a critical eye and offer constructive criticism if possible, because that's how creative people know what to look out for when striving for perfection. This video was largely negative because fans of Project Moon already know how good this Canto is, and criticism in this fandom is very sparse. There are, however, always things to point out and improve upon, because no piece of media is ever perfect, no matter how much you love it. And this video too is not perfect, so don't be afraid to offer your own criticisms and improvements in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and now we're moving on to news about the state of this channel. I'm aware that I haven't uploaded anything in the past 4 months, and I do apologize. I had some personal issues and battles with YouTube monetization, as well as my own procrastination to deal with. But another thing is that I'm working on a huge video essay on a game that is not related to Project Moon in any way. I wanted to make this video right now, because otherwise it would be too late to share my opinions while the fandom is actively discussing the Canto. Originally, I planned on releasing said video essay before New Year's, but as you can see, that didn't really pan out. It's gonna be done when it's done, but until then, don't expect any content from me. I want to fully lock in on this idea and finally realize it, after which I'll try to come back to regular uploads, at least once a week is the goal. For people asking me whether I'll make a Discord server, I don't think I'm ready yet to handle something like this, and I don't see the point for now. It's probably gonna happen in the future. I do want to more actively interact with the community, I'm just not mentally prepared yet. I've learned recently that making promises is a bad habit of mine, cause I tend to break them quite often. But still, I'll do what I can to satisfy both myself and my viewers. In any case, thanks again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, comment, and do all the other YouTube stuff. Until next time. Bye. Bye-bye.